So I'm Holly Race, and I am the author of the Midnight's Twins trilogy. It is an urban fantasy that is set between our world and the world we go to when we dream. And it follows twins Fern and Dolly, who do not like each other very much at the start of the trilogy for various, maybe good, maybe not so good reasons. And they come across a secret army known as the Knights who protect people from their nightmares, because if you die in your nightmares, then you die in the real world as well. And it's got a bit of Arthurian legend, little smidgen of mind control, and a lot of death.
Just a smidgen.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. We all know I adore this. People have seen me tear up on social media after reading this trilogy. I love it. Where does the inspiration for like such a vast world come from? Because obviously you've got the two elements, the dream world and the kind of real world as well. Like, where did the inspiration to kind of explore those come from?
So the kernel of it came from the fact that I've always had really, really vivid dreams, mostly nightmares. And about 10, no, close to 15 years ago now, I was like, I wonder what it would be like if those dreams were actually real and had a kind of real life consequence and danger to them. And it sort of grew from there. And that's the only thing pretty much that stayed the same. In my original drafts, there was a male protagonist, like it was male only child protagonist who was 9 years old. So it was very much middle grade, and he lived in Bristol, and it was his, this is not really a spoiler because it happens right at the start of the trilogy, but it was his dad that had died instead of his mum. And yeah, so and there was the villain was completely different as well. So yeah, it changed drastically for everything other than that kind of like world, fantasy world. And then the real world London setting was very much inspired by the fact that I was living in London at the time of writing the first book, and I lived in East London, which is where Fern and Ollie live, and I was working in Soho, which is right in the centre of the city. And I used to just adore, especially of a summer's evening, walking from Soho to Liverpool Street to catch the train, which, for anyone who doesn't know London, it's between 30 minutes to an hour's walk, depending on what route you take. And I used to let myself just get lost in the little back streets of London and see if I could find my way to Liverpool Street somehow without looking at my phone. So I kind of discovered lots of London from that, and lots of little secret gardens and stuff like that, and just really fell in love with the city. And I wanted to bring that to the trilogy, but with a bit of a fantasy twist. So there's sort of, sea monsters lurking in the Thames and unicorns in the parks and stuff like that.
Yeah. Obviously, we've got elements of Arthurian kind of legend and myth in there as well. What is it like drawing on inspiration that's kind of like so well known, yet still putting like a really contemporary and like fresh twist on it, so it's not the same old that people maybe would expect, if you know what I mean?
Yeah. To be honest, Arthurian legend is something that I grew up with. I used to read The Once and Future King by T.H. White so many times. And I've always been really, really fascinated by mythology and world mythology, and the way that myths from completely different continents can have links to them. So I kind of wanted to draw a bit on that for some of the world building. So like the Fae, who are the sort of gods and goddesses of the dream world, are very much taken from the archetypes of world myth. With the Arthurian legend, I think because I'd always really loved it, and it felt like it was a good sort of useful structure to kind of hang some of the world building off. So the round table is round because it allows all the knights to be equal, and because that's kind of a big theme in the secret army of the knights in the books of equality and diversity. It just kind of felt like a good parallel But because you say that I wanted to kind of put a bit more of a contemporary twist on it, I was thinking a lot at the time that I was writing this, which was sort of 2016, 2017, so around Brexit, and the rise of populism, about the way that we at the moment seem to have a tendency to kind of take our heroes, whether those celebrities are politicians or music or pop stars or whatever, or footballers, and put them on pedestals, and then no one can ever say anything bad about them or criticize them at all if they're our heroes. And it's like, they're human. No one is
No one can live up to that.
We all mess up sometimes, and we should all be held accountable for when we mess up. And I think it's how we deal with how we mess up that kind of shows who we are, and our moral kind of kind of morality. So I kind of wanted to take that idea of King Arthur, as being this hero, this legendary hero that everyone thinks was just this amazing kind of fantastical king of Britain as was, and turn it on its head a little bit. So he's I mean, morally grey isn't even it. He's just a villain in the trilogy. He's just a villain, and there's a kind of modern parallel to that as well, in terms of who the kind of trilogy villain is, which I won't go into because of spoilers.
Yeah. I wouldn't say Arthur. All your villains were morally grey. I'd say just bad.
Yeah.
One of the things that kind of most stood out to me about the trilogy, and I really kind of like loved kind of reading and exploring, was the idea of the power of dreams. And I remember a quote-ish about the power of dreams and what happens when people are kind of like denied dreams, both kind of like the big sense and obviously sleeping dreams. What was it that kind of sparked that kind of exploration in the book? Because it had me hooked.
Oh, that's really nice. I mean, I think a lot of creative people feel this way, that imagination is kind of one of the fundamental tenets of humanity. I am no different. And so it really kind of came from that, of me thinking, I think when I was thinking about the world of Anun, which is the world of dreams in the trilogy, it was the logic of that world had to be based on dreams and imagination. So it's all powered by imagination, and sort of what it just got me thinking, what would happen if you could control people's dreams, if they weren't coming from their own hearts? What happens if you stop them from dreaming? What would that do to a person? And for me, I think if I didn't have sleep dreams, then I would probably be a lot more well rested, quite frankly, because I would stop waking up from nightmares. But I think if I didn't have dreams, as in ambitions and sort of dreams for myself and for my loved ones, then I would just be a bit of a shadow of a human, really. So it very much my kind of personal philosophy, and I suspect the philosophy of a lot of people who work in creative industries and do creative things.
Definitely. It was something that when I was reading it, it was just, it always interests me, like creativity and imagination and how that affects people and kind of like the wider world through that. And it was just one of the many threads throughout the trilogy that had me hooked. Obviously it is a trilogy. They've got three beautiful, heartbreaking books. What was it like writing? Was there any major differences between writing the first one to the second one and the second one to the third one? Because I imagine it's quite difficult to keep raising the stakes, because you do, like, you raise the stakes every single time. I think, like, I was like, you can't break my heart anymore. Oh no, wait, you can. And then just crying mess. Like, how is it like? Was it quite a simple thing to kind of, did you always see it as kind of your roller coaster, or is it quite difficult when you're actually writing 3 books to
I
link
think,
them but still raise those stakes?
yeah, I think because my background's in TV, as a script editor, and so my head really just kind of works in long form. So I have huge admiration for other authors who write standalone books. So I'm just like, how can you fit everything into 100,000 words? Like that's not a, how do you make it such a complete beautiful little package of a story? My head does not work like that. I need at least 300,000 words to make this happen. So for me it's more of a natural thing to think in terms of that kind of length. And yeah, I tried to write standalones and I'm just like, I need more, I need more. But I think in terms of raising the stakes, one of the things that we always think about in TV is you just throw everything in the first season and you trust that if you get renewed, then you're going to find a way to make it bigger and better. And I know that in TV, that is not always the case. And people are like, oh, second season is nothing on the first. But you kind of have to go into it with that view of, yeah, we throw everything at the first one to try and get everyone interested, and then you just trust that your storytelling is it has enough legs to see you through. So I sort of tried to go into book one thinking, just throw everything at it with book one, kill a load of people off that everyone thinks, oh, they're bound to be a, you know, a full trilogy character.
Full trilogy person, like they're so lovely and they bring so much like joy and happiness. You know who I'm talking about. Like that's going to be the person that like we're going to get for morale throughout this. No, you just
That's the great thing, because you get people thinking that and then you kill them and then everyone's like, whoa, no one is off the table here. But it did make it, I will admit, it did make it difficult in book two, because I was like, I've killed off so many characters and now I need to kill off a bunch more and I need to introduce enough of them to make people actually care for them. Well, shit.
You did it though. You did it. You did it. You introduced those characters and I was like, I'm not falling for this. And I fell for it.
The number of messages I got with book two where friends were like, you better not kill her off after what happened in book one. I'm like,
yeah, I was one of those people. It was like, you can't. Holly, you can't. Like,
I'm sorry.
no, can't do this. I was like, because I remember saying it and then you saying, well, they're one of my favorite characters. And I took like a sigh and I was like, oh, it's going to be okay. And then the trust issues that have developed from this series.
Oh no. I'm glad you're still talking to me.
In the best, it's one of those things where it's like, it emotionally destroyed me at times, but I loved it for it. Like, I would put myself through it again. It's one of those series.
I love those books. I love those books where I also am just like, you know, tears everywhere in public, snot. I'm like, yes, give me more, inject it into my veins.
Yeah, definitely. This does that. And I still don't know how you kept raising the stakes, because every time I was like, you can't do anything more than like, and then you just like, watch me. I almost feel like you every time you finished a book and people went, well, how can you raise this further? You just went, watch me. I'll do it. I'm gonna do it, and you're gonna regret asking me. So obviously we've kind of briefly mentioned that the trilogy centers around a rather interesting set of twins, I must admit. They don't always get along all that well.
No.
In fact, they are pretty cruel to each other in some instances. They're not kind of that role model kind of like family that you see at all.
Got a lot of flaws, a lot of stuff to work out between them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're a very flawed, it's a very flawed relationship. It's a very interesting one to read about. But what kind of drew you to like using twins rather than, I think with a lot of YA fantasy, especially at the moment and over the past couple of years, it's been kind of found families or like enemies to lovers or like things like that. And twins is just not something that I've seen in a really, in fact, I can't think of another one now. I've said that, but like it works so well and the dynamic's so interesting, especially between those two, because they are both very interesting people. But I suppose I just want to know, why was it always going to be kind of, I know it was once going to be just one soul dude. I don't know why I like that. But like when you realized you wanted, like, was it like a duo that you realized and then it was always going to be twins, or was there a few different shape shifts in that?
No, when I realized I wanted it to be two of them, it was always going to be twins. I can't quite remember the exact kind of thought process that got me there. But I think because I'm an only child, I've always found it really, really fascinating watching my friends who've got siblings, my family who've got siblings, and the way that they interact with each other is just fascinating, because you can do and act in ways with your siblings that you just can't do with your mates. There's that bond there that is never ever going to go away, even if you absolutely hate each other. And it's really weird watching some of my friends' siblings and my sort of uncles and aunts and stuff who just go years without even talking to each other, and then something happens and they are there and they are the rock. And I can't, there aren't many friendships that have that kind of essence to them. And I think with Fern and Ollie, they originally they were going to get on from the start, and then I was like, it's just a bit boring, isn't it? Like, why not give it a bit more of a bite? And as soon as I had that, it really kind of became the heart of the trilogy, that I was like, okay, I know what this is now. This is a platonic love story, which I hope sort of becomes really clear at the end. And I get a little bit defensive when I hear people sort of talk about how YA has to have the romance has to be at the center of a YA book. And I love enemies to lovers, friends to lovers, any romance, love triangles, love squares, love hexagons, love all that in a YA, but I don't think that it should be a prerequisite. And I just think there's something quite interesting about following that sibling dynamic through 3 books of hating each other, maybe not hating each other quite so much, coming to understand each other, maybe starting to like/love each other, maybe not, like all that messiness that comes with those kind of sibling dynamics. And then because they're twins, there's a lot more that you can do with them in terms of the lore and the world building, because we in a lot of cultures, twins are kind of sort of symbolic and there's a certain magic to them. And so it was quite fun finding that within the world of dreams and what that might look like. And I won't go into more because we get into spoiler territory there. But...
Yeah. No, I loved, like, I am a sucker for an enemies to romance. I'm here, but it was so satisfying to read from this, like, the start, where there is a lot of stuff going on between these two. Like, they are at completely different ends of the table, looking in different directions. Like, no. They're like, so we both share some people in common, and that's about as much as we understand each other. And then at the end, just oh, it was it's so good. It's so good. I loved it. I loved it. It was so satisfying, and I think it was all that more satisfying because it was kind of that more platonic love, like that we all kind of, in some ways, I think we all hope for more. Like I would rather have more of those kinds of relationships than like pirate enemy to lovers scenario. Like if it was me in a book, then I would quite like a lot of friendships. Like
Yeah.
they'd be my main. They'd be like, when you think about real world scenarios, like of course everyone's like all happily ever after, but like there's something special about kind of like siblings and friends in general.
Yeah. Yeah. My friendship group, I've got a little girl, and because I'm an only child, and we don't see my husband's siblings all that often, our friends are her aunts and uncles, and she knows them as aunts and uncles, and we see them every week, and they're absolutely my siblings. And yeah, so that kind of family is everything.
So I suppose with it being 3 books and all of the kind of journey that goes throughout it, did your writing process ever change throughout like from book 1 to book 3? Do you feel like you became a pro, or did it get
I don't think I'm ever going to feel as though I've become a pro. Sure.
You are. I mean,
but yeah, the process
you're a pro at breaking my heart and then piecing it back together and then breaking
it. Success. Yes, my process definitely changed. The first one, I planaramaed everything to the nth degree before I even, wrote a single sentence. And then within the first chapter, completely diverted from the plan. Had every chapter sorted, had spent months and months figuring out what was going to happen in each chapter. And then it's a bit of a spoiler, but I'm going to say it anyway. Basically, in the original plan, Fern was just going to be accepted into the Knights first thing. And then when I got to write it, I was like, oh, wouldn't it be so much more interesting if Ollie was the one who got accepted and Fern did not, and she had to find her way in? Oh, that is much more interesting. And of course, that meant that the entire plan had to just be yeeted out. And because it changed everything about how Fern saw herself. It definitely changed the first sort of half of Midnight's Twins and had kind of proper long-lasting consequences through the rest of the trilogy. So yeah, I learned not to be a super planner for sure, because that's just wasted time for me. Clearly, I need to keep some room for surprises to come as I write. I think the second book I was writing in the middle of the first lockdown, while trying to hold down another job, and my husband also working full-time from home, and we had a 1-year-old. So it was an absolute swear word nightmare. And it was really, really hard. I never want to do it again. And I had thought to myself, you know what? I've got loads of time. I'll get around to this, and then I'll like blitz it in March, April, and then I'll totally have my first draft ready for my deadline. And then lockdown came, and I was like, well, shit. And so I had to have an extension on my deadline. It was very messy, and I never want to get into that position again. So since book 2, with book 3, I was much more regimented about, okay, I will write X amount of words per day. Had my little calendar sorted out of where I needed to be at certain times, and I pretty much stuck to that, with a few, like a week or so wiggle room here and there. but yeah, I was much stricter with myself about being like, no, 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 if you haven't done your word count, then you can't go to the cinema tonight, or you have to work later instead of going to bed, or get up early or whatever. So yeah, I've got more regimented about that, but much more freer about planning and just kind of letting the first draft be messy but surprising, basically.
Yeah, I can't imagine the trilogy if Fern had just got in.
Yeah, I know, right?
That's not even like, that would just change the first little bit, like, because that makes that so like, her relationship with her brother would be like everything that, oh,
Yes.
I'm just sat here like, I can't even. No.
I know. It just sounds really dull, doesn't it?
It just seems, it sounds like, especially because that's the thing that happens like quite early. You think, oh, like it's a smallish thing, like, but no, that would like drastically change the entire trilogy. Just that like one little thing.
Yeah.
But that would totally be, if I was a writer, that's what I would be like, because I'm very much like that with my kind of drawings and things. If I do a collection, I'll sit there and I'll pull loads of things together, and I'll be like, I've really got this, like, I really want it to look like this. This is going to be the vibe. This is going to be the feel. There's going to be these colors. I sit down and within 10 minutes, I'm on a completely different track. Like, and I've probably spent like a month pulling all of that like inspiration and stuff together. And then I'm just like, we're going to go in that direction. So I feel like
when you do that, it's actually your creativity kind of taking over and being like, it's more us, it's more me if I do it that way.
yeah, it's just like, well, you could, but also there's this seems more fun, doesn't it? And I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it, yeah. Fine. One of the things I wanted to talk about are some of the creatures that are in your dream world, because some of them are frankly terrifying. And where kind of like the inspiration for them came from, because obviously you've got really nice moments where there's like unicorns and nice pleasant dreams, but you do have some rather scary nightmare fuel-esque creatures, and I was just wondering where the inspiration for them came from, because they're terrifying and I still think about them.
The first book, Creatures, the Traitorers, they probably came from the fact that I sort of grew up on the Alien films. I mean, I don't think there's any getting away from the fact that in my head they're basically a xenomorph. Dream version of a xenomorph. Yeah, that's where they came from. But I think a lot of the kind of theme of the trilogy has been our nightmares that are self-created are not the most dangerous things. Humans are the most dangerous. And so every single sort of monster in each book has a human-based element to it. And so yeah, I was kind of trying to figure out ways of making humanity frightening in a sort of dream sense, basically.
Yeah, it was the humans are definitely some of the scarier. No, in fact, yeah, they're more scary than some of the moments in here where I'm like, oh no, this is terrifying. And also I know this is happening in the dream realm, but sometimes it feels like it's happening in the real world now, which is even more terrifying.
Yeah, it's a lot of it very much based in my anxiety about political events.
Yeah,
it's pretty clear all the way through. Just my desperate, like, I don't want this to happen in the real world, but it is happening in the real world. Therapy, work it out in your book.
Like, maybe if I write it and do like I put it in this fantastical book. Everyone will see how crazy this is because it's in a fantasy. I totally get it. I suppose I'd love to know how writing this last book felt, because it was I had to prepare myself, because whilst this trilogy has been emotionally destroying at times, I didn't want it to end. So I had to, like, and that's me as a reader, and you've spent so long kind of like with, like, was it difficult to like write this? I'd imagine it would be more difficult than maybe the other two, just knowing that it's that kind of
That's a
final
good question.
final countdown. Or was it a yay, I can go explore something else feeling?
It wasn't really it wasn't a yeah, I can explore something else feeling, but it was weirdly joyful in that, like, the second book, I had proper second book syndrome with it. I found it really hard to write. The third book, I think because it was about tying up those loose ends, it sort of, and I knew where everything was going by that point, and I did have an idea of my writing process, so I knew to accept that the first draft was going to be really scrappy, and that was okay because it was going to come together in the second and third draft. I think also because there were scenes in the third book that I had been imagining writing from before I started writing book one. And the very ending did change. I decided to change what happened in the ending about halfway through book two. And I emailed my editor had emailed me and be like, I know you had planned on X happening. Does that still happen? And I was like, no, X doesn't happen, but Y happens instead. What do you think? And she was like, oh my God, that's so much more heartbreaking. Yes, I love it.
I just love that, like, your editors on side with, like, let's see how many hearts we can break with this.
No. She actually talked me down. There was going to be one of the characters in who does survive book two was going to die, and she talked me down. She was like, "No, you please don't do that. Please don't do that." So you have her to thank for one of the characters in book two surviving.
Like, I kind of want to send her flowers now. Thank you.
But yeah, book three, I really enjoyed writing it, but it was more emotional than the other two because it was saying goodbye to it. And I was really saying goodbye to these characters who had been such a huge part of my life for a decade. And yeah, tying up all those loose ends. And I did actually write the final couple of lines. That they were the first lines that I wrote of book three. So I knew what I was aiming towards at the very end. And I think they're probably my favorite lines of the entire trilogy, actually.
Yeah. They're lines I had to read a couple of times, merely because my eyes were blurry, because I was sobbing. But we all know that I'm obsessed with this. With you, with the books.
Oh, Charlie.
So I suppose that just leaves us to kind of see if there's any books that you would recommend that are either as emotionally destroying as this trilogy, or something that might pick you up after reading
Ooh, okay. So I am currently nearly at the end of Mindwalker by Kate Dillon, which it's very good. It's very good, isn't it?
Yeah. I got to the I like to call it like the confession bit in the middle.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, I just literally sat with it and was like, yes, thank God. Why is it Obviously, you two. Come on.
Yeah. I'd seen a load of TikToks about chapter 19. And so when I got to chapter 18, it was about midnight, and I usually go to bed at 10 o'clock. And I was like, I've just got to go through chapter 19 to see what happens. And it did not disappoint. So, yes, Mindwalker by Kate Dillon is brilliant. The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri is just beautiful, beautiful world building. I aspire to write the kind of lush fantasy that she does. It's just genius. For pick me up, sorry, I'm looking at this is my UK YA bookcase. I mean, it's not necessarily feel good, but Daughter of Darkness by Kate and Liz Core is fantastic. What else? So many. I mean, maybe I should just run along my entire bookcase there and take your pick.
Any of these.
Yeah, pretty much. We're just really, really lucky for UKYA, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think this year, 2023 as well, is like, I've been saying all year that 2022 has been amazing for UKYA, and it has been. And then there's some stuff coming out. Like, I don't know what's I'm not gonna have enough time to read them all. There's so many, and I'm so excited.
Charlie, have you been sent Glow Up Lara Bloom?
Yes.
Okay, so Dee, everyone should pre-order this. Dee was my right mentee last year, and she's fantastic. I didn't mentor her for Glow Up Lara Bloom, but I've just been sent it, and I managed to peek at the first few pages, and it's just brilliant. And that is going to be a good uplifting one.
Yes, I got sent. I don't know if I've got like the more final version, because I know I've had a quick look at the email with it on. It just, because I get those now.
Yeah, you're important. Really good rest of the day, Charlie. Thank you for having me on and everything. Really appreciate it.